In the picturesque Greek town of Glycynera, located near Athens, a tragedy occurred on May 11, 2021 that shook not only Greece, but the entire world. 20-year-old Caroline Crouch was brutally murdered in her own home, where she lived with her 33-year-old husband Bobish and their 11-month-old daughter Lydia. Caroline and Bobish's story began on the island of Alonissos, where they met in 2017. Caroline, who had moved to Greece from England at the age of 8, was then a 15-year-old schoolgirl. Bobish, a successful helicopter pilot who was 12 years her senior, immediately caught the girl's attention. Despite the significant age difference, a romantic relationship developed between them. A year and a half later, Bobish proposed to 17-year-old Caroline. Soon after her 18th birthday, the couple married while on vacation in Portugal. It was an atypical wedding for Greek traditions, without guests and lavish celebrations. The newlyweds settled in Athens, where Caroline studied at university and Bobish continued working as a pilot. At first glance, their life seemed idyllic. The couple's social media was filled with photos of the happy couple. They appeared successful and in love. However, serious problems were hidden behind the beautiful facade. 3 months after the wedding, Caroline became pregnant, but unfortunately miscarried. This loss was a difficult ordeal for the young couple. Soon Caroline became pregnant again, and in July 2020 their daughter Lydia was born. Motherhood became the most important thing in Caroline's life. Everyone who knew her said she adored her daughter and devoted herself entirely to caring for her. However, it was during this period that serious problems in the couple's relationship began to manifest. Caroline's diary, which later became important evidence in the case, revealed the dark side of their marriage. In her entries, she described in detail how Bobish became increasingly controlling and manipulative. He isolated her from friends and family, tracked her movements, and even accompanied her to therapy sessions to eavesdrop on conversations. In July 2020, when Lydia was only a month old, Caroline first told Bobish she wanted to leave him. In her diary she wrote, "Today my little one is a month old. It's also the day I told Bobish I want to leave. I feel so bad." She even found an apartment in central Athens for herself and her daughter. However, fear of leaving her daughter without a father and emotional dependence on Bobish forced her to stay. "I love him so much that I can't leave, even if this relationship is hurting me," Caroline wrote in her diary. These words reflected the depth of her inner conflict and the complexity of the situation she found herself in. Bobish, for his part, did everything possible to keep Caroline under control. According to their psychologist Eleni, he installed a program on his wife's phone to track her movements. Caroline was afraid Bobish might hear their conversations during therapy sessions and constantly checked if the office door was tightly closed. Despite the problems, the couple continued to live together in their home in Glycynera. They even planned to build a new house and purchased a plot of land for this purpose. Caroline's parents gave them €50,000 to start construction. The couple kept part of this money, about €10,000, at home, a common practice in Greece, where the banking system is not considered reliable. Outwardly, the couple's life seemed prosperous. Bobish was a successful helicopter pilot, they traveled, lived in a nice house. However, the family's financial situation raised questions for investigators after the tragedy. Suspicions arose that Bobish might have been involved in drug smuggling using his helicopter. This could explain their luxurious lifestyle. The tension in Caroline and Bobish's relationship was growing. On May 10, 2021, according to the investigation, the couple had a big fight. Caroline again threatened to leave her husband. She even tried to book a hotel for herself and her daughter for the night but was unable to do so. On the morning of May 11, 2021 at 6 o'clock, police received an alarming call from Bobish in Agnostopoulos. He reported a brutal robbery during which his wife was killed. When police arrived at the scene, they saw a shocking picture. In the bedroom on the second floor of the house lay Caroline's body. She was dead, her face pressed against a pillow. 11-month-old Lydia was lying on her body, crying and trying to wake her mother. Bobish was tied to the floor, his eyes, mouth, and neck wrapped with tape. The body of the family dog, a 7-month-old husky named Roxy, was hanging on the stairs. The dog had been strangled with its own leash. The house was in disarray, drawers were pulled out, things scattered, the Monopoly box where money was kept lay empty on the floor. Bobish told the police a shocking story. According to him, around 4:30 in the morning, 3 men in masks and motorcycle balaclavas broke into the house. They were armed with guns. The attackers tied up Bobish, threatened to shoot the child, and demanded he give them money in valuables. "I told them where the money was so they wouldn't harm my family," Bobish explained. According to him, the robbers took about 10,000 euros in cash and jewelry worth about 20,000 euros. However, despite his cooperation, one of the attackers strangled Caroline with his bare hands. Bobish claimed he heard his wife begging for help but could do nothing as he was tied up. After that, he lost consciousness. When Bobish came to, he managed to find his mobile phone and dialed a neighbor's number using his nose. Due to the tape on his mouth, he could only make muffled sounds, but the neighbor realized something was wrong and called the police. Bobish's account of the brutal robbery shocked the public. Greek media widely covered this tragedy, and police launched a large-scale investigation. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis personally promised that the criminals would be found and punished. A reward of 300,000 euros was announced for information that would help solve the crime. Bobish actively cooperated with the investigation and often communicated with the press. He described the attackers as people who spoke broken Greek with an Albanian accent. According to him, one of the robbers was tall, strongly built, with short blonde hair. The police made a composite sketch of the suspect based on this description. 3 days after the murder, Caroline's funeral was held on the island of Alanissos, where she grew up. Bobish was present at the ceremony, holding little Lydia in his arms. He looked devastated and spoke about his love for his late wife. "I was happy to meet her, and even happier that she became the mother of our child." Meanwhile, the police carefully examined all possible leads. They checked video surveillance records, questioned neighbors, analyzed data from mobile phones. Special attention was paid to organized criminal groups that specialized in home robberies. A few weeks after the murder, police detained a suspect, a 36-year-old Georgian citizen named Georgi Karasishvili. He was a known criminal involved in a series of violent robberies in Athens. Karasishvili was trying to flee the country using forged documents when he was detained. However, after 4 days of interrogation, it became clear that Karasishvili had nothing to do with Caroline's murder. No evidence of his involvement was found, and he had to be released. This was a serious blow to the investigation. The investigation hit a dead end. No fingerprints or DNA traces of the attackers were found. Neighbors hadn't heard any suspicious sounds on the night of the crime. The only witness remained Bobish, whose story became increasingly contradictory upon detailed analysis. Investigators began to notice inconsistencies in Bobish's testimony. They couldn't find convincing evidence that criminals had entered the house through the basement window, as Bobish claimed. Moreover, the window was too small for several men to crawl through, especially if one of them was tall and stocky, as Bobish described. The police also noticed that although the house looked ransacked, this disorder seemed strangely neat for a violent robbery. Additionally, neighbors had only heard the dog barking, but no cries for help or a child crying. The biggest question was the lack of any biological traces of criminals in the house. This was extremely unusual for this type of crime. Even under Caroline's nails, no foreign DNA was found, although according to Bobish, she had desperately fought with the attackers. Another important point was the home surveillance camera. Criminals usually take such cameras with them, but in this case, only the memory card had been removed. The data showed that the card was removed at 1:20 at night, although Bobish claimed the robbers broke into the house at 4:30. Key evidence came from Caroline's fitness watch. The watch automatically recorded her pulse. According to this data, at 3:58 in the morning Caroline was asleep. At 4:05 her pulse suddenly jumped by 50%, indicating severe stress. At 4:11 Caroline's heart stopped beating. This contradicted Bobish's version of the time of the attack. Analysis of Bobish's phone also revealed inconsistencies. The fitness app installed on it showed that at the time when he was supposedly tied up, Bobish was moving around the house. Investigators also tried to recreate how Bobish could have dialed the emergency service number with his nose while being tied up and with his mouth taped. None of the officers managed to do this under such conditions. Gradually, police suspicions focused on Bobish himself. They learned that on the night of the murder, Caroline had tried to book a hotel for herself and her daughter. In a message to a friend, she wrote that she was going to leave her husband. On June 17, 2021, 37 days after the murder, a memorial service for Caroline was held on the island of Alanissos. During the ceremony, police officers approached Bobish and asked him to go with them to Athens. They said they had detained a suspect and needed Bobish's help for identification. In reality, this was a pretext to bring Bobish to the police station for questioning. For 8 hours, investigators presented him with evidence that refuted his version of events. Finally, Bobish broke down and confessed to murdering his wife. According to Bobish, on the night of May 11th, he and Caroline had an argument. Caroline said she wanted to leave him and take their daughter. This enraged Bobish. He claimed that Caroline was rough with the child, throwing her into the crib. Bobish said he lost control and suffocated his wife with a pillow. "I suffocated her while she was sleeping because I was afraid of her. She had a black belt in kickboxing, and I was afraid she would beat me," Bobish explained to investigators. He admitted that the murder lasted about 5 minutes. After the murder, Bobish panicked. He thought about disposing of the body but realized it was impossible. Then he decided to stage a robbery. He killed the dog Roxy, knowing that no one would believe he was capable of such a thing. "I killed the dog because I knew no one would believe I was capable of it, and therefore people wouldn't believe I did this," he told the police. Bobish arranged things in the house to create the impression of a robbery, then tied himself up and called the police. He claimed he did this to protect his daughter and prevent her from being left without both parents. Bobish's confession shocked Greece and the world. A man who had portrayed a grieving widower for a month turned out to be a cold-blooded killer. The police called Bobish a first-class actor who managed to deceive not only law enforcement but also Caroline's family and the public. The Greek police chief stated that they had suspected Bobish from the very beginning. When police first arrived at the crime scene, they were alarmed by Bobish's coldness regarding his wife's death. One of the officers even took the child away from him, sensing something was wrong. However, these suspicions were kept secret so Bobish wouldn't flee. Investigators noted that Bobish turned out to be a surprisingly intelligent criminal. He masterfully manipulated public opinion, blaming the crime on foreigners. This led to society's attention focusing on searching for a non-existent gang rather than investigating the murder itself. Bobish actively communicated with the press, gave interviews, and appeared devastated on camera. He even continued to post photos with Caroline on social media, captioning them "Together Forever." This behavior convinced many of his innocence. Caroline's mother, Susan, later confessed that she never suspected her son-in-law for a second. She placed all her hopes on Bobish and was filled with anger upon learning of his confession. The word "wife" was quickly removed from Caroline's marble tombstone, leaving only the inscription, "Our beloved daughter and mother." Bobish was charged with premeditated murder. In addition, he was accused of obstructing justice, giving false testimony, and animal cruelty. Public opinion was so hostile towards Bobish that during his delivery to court, he was dressed in a bulletproof vest and surrounded by armed police officers. Bobish was called the most disgusting person in Greece, although there were those who supported him. A small group of middle-aged women gathered near the court to support him. One of them told journalists, "I in no way justify what he did, but he is quite handsome and charming." Another confessed, "I often think about him. I collected his photos and hung them on the wall in my bedroom." In court, prosecutors detailed Bobish's actions before and after Caroline's murder. They argued that his every action, from removing the memory card from the surveillance camera to carefully staging the crime scene, indicated a person who acted calmly and with premeditated intent. The fact that Bobish attacked Caroline while she was sleeping, according to prosecutors, demonstrated the cold-bloodedness and deliberate nature of the crime. In his testimony, which lasted all day, Bobish said, "I ruined my life, I ruined my family's life. I wish I could go back in time." He called his marriage to Caroline a fairy tale and claimed that her happiness was his top priority. According to Bobish, after the child's birth, Caroline became capricious and prone to emotional outbursts. This, he claimed, led to the tragedy. Bobish described the night of the murder in detail, maintaining an impassive expression throughout. He acknowledged his responsibility for Caroline's death but denied that it was premeditated murder. Instead, he insisted it was a crime committed in a state of passion. In May 2022, after a month-long trial, the jury unanimously found Bobish guilty on all counts. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment. Prison life proved difficult for Bobish. He expressed fear for his life after being beaten by inmates of the nationalities he had tried to blame for his crime. Caroline Crouch's murder was one of 17 deaths of women at the hands of their romantic partners in Greece in 2021. In almost every case, the victim had tried to leave the relationship before her death. Such killings fall under the definition of femicide, the murder of women or girls because of their gender. In nearly 40% of femicide cases, the perpetrator is the victim's husband or partner. Caroline's tragedy forced Greek society to openly discuss domestic violence issues that were often previously hushed up. Victims like Caroline suffered in silence, lacking proper support. A journalist who participated in the documentary, Caroline, The Murder That Fooled the World, noted, "The only positive thing that came out of this case was that the term femicide was introduced into Greek media." This case, unfortunately, gave Greek society the opportunity to realize how deep this problem is. Domestic violence expert Dr. Rema Katz commented on Bobish's attempts to tarnish Caroline's character after her death. "This attempt to disgrace her character and make people think badly of her is, of course, an attempt to gain more sympathy and more lenient treatment, which completely contradicts his claims of remorse or repentance for what he did." Regarding Bobish's claims about Caroline's aggressive behavior, Dr. Katz explained, "We often see victims arguing back in response, and we see victims even physically fighting back against coercive control. And sometimes we think, oh, they can't be a real victim. They're fighting back." Bobish might have created the impression that she wasn't a real victim because she fought back, but in my opinion, she really was a victim. Caroline's death left a deep mark on many people's lives. Her parents, David and Susan, received full custody of little Lydia. Bobish's parents were denied joint custody but were granted the right to visit the child 5 days a month. According to reports, despite everything that happened, Caroline's parents maintained cordial relations with Bobish's parents for Lydia's well-being. Caroline Crouch still had many plans and dreams that were tragically cut short. Her daughter Lydia is now growing up in her late mother's childhood home on the island of Alanissos. David, Caroline's father, said, "Lydia is doing well, and like her mother, she becomes more beautiful every day. She's already walking confidently, eating well, and charming everyone she interacts with." The case of Caroline Crouch became a turning point for Greek society in its attitude towards domestic violence and femicide. It forced many to rethink their views on these issues and prompted action at the legislative level. One of the experts commenting on this case expressed hope, "I hope this case will live long in the memory of Greek society because it will remind us, firstly, of many misconceptions we have about people. And it will also remind us how much attention we should pay to the problem of domestic violence." Caroline's tragedy highlighted the importance of early detection of signs of violence in relationships. Experts emphasize that controlling behavior, isolation from friends and family, and financial control can all be early warning signs of potentially dangerous relationships. Caroline's story also drew attention to the issue of large age gaps in romantic relationships, especially when one partner is still a minor. The fact that Bobish began a relationship with Caroline when she was only 15 and he was 27 raised many questions about the ethics and potential vulnerability of younger partners in such relationships. The case also raised questions about the role of social media in creating the illusion of a perfect life. Bobish and Caroline's Instagram photos created an image of a happy couple, hiding the dark reality of their relationship. This served as a reminder of the importance of critically evaluating what people show on social media. Bobish's behavior after the murder, his public appearances, interviews, social media posts, became a subject of study for psychologists and criminologists. His ability to lie convincingly for an extended period sparked discussions about the nature of psychopathy and the need for a more thorough approach to investigating similar crimes. The investigation into Caroline's murder also revealed shortcomings in law enforcement work. The initial fixation on searching for a non-existent gang of foreign criminals showed how biases and stereotypes can hinder effective investigation. This led to a reassessment of police methods and the need for a more objective approach to investigating domestic violence. Caroline Crouch's tragic fate forced many to think about how society can better protect women who find themselves in dangerous relationships. Various initiatives were proposed, from strengthening legislation on domestic violence to creating more effective support systems for victims. This story also underscored the importance of fostering healthy relationships from an early age. Schools in Greece began to pay more attention to topics of gender equality, respect, and nonviolent communication. Friends and acquaintances remembered Caroline as a cheerful, kind, and strong personality. She loved animals, enjoyed diving, and had a black belt in kickboxing. Her life was full of plans and dreams that were tragically cut short. The last video Caroline posted on Instagram shows her on the beach near her home, joyfully lifting her daughter Lydia and kissing her on the cheek. It's a touching reminder of a mother's love for her child and a life that was prematurely ended. The case of Caroline Crouch left a deep mark on Greek society and raised many questions about the nature of violence, deception, and justice. It became a symbol of the fight against domestic violence and a reminder of the importance of protecting vulnerable members of society. Bobish Anagnostopoulos, despite his confession, continued to try to manipulate public opinion even during the trial. He attempted to present himself as a loving father who acted impulsively under the influence of strong emotions. However, the evidence presented in court clearly pointed to a premeditated murder. Prosecutors meticulously broke down each of Bobish's steps on the night of the murder and afterward. They showed how he methodically prepared for the crime, turning off surveillance cameras, how carefully he staged the robbery, and how coldly he lied to the police, family, and media for weeks after the murder. The court also heard testimony from psychologists who analyzed Bobish's personality. They noted his narcissistic traits and lack of empathy, which allowed him to maintain the deception for so long. This sparked discussions about the nature of evil and some people's ability to hide their true selves behind a mask of normalcy. The court's verdict, life imprisonment, was perceived by the public as a just punishment for the brutal crime. However, for many, it did not bring a complete sense of closure. Many questions remained about how this tragedy could have been prevented. Caroline's parents, David and Susan, faced the difficult task of raising their granddaughter, knowing she would never meet her mother. They dedicated themselves to keeping Caroline's memory alive for Lydia, telling her about her brave and loving mom. Caroline Crouch's story became the subject of numerous documentaries, books, and articles. Journalists and researchers tried to understand how a young, seemingly happy couple could hide such a dark reality. This led to broader discussions about the nature of modern relationships and how society can better support young people in building healthy partnerships. The Greek government, under public pressure, initiated a series of legislative changes aimed at strengthening protection for victims of domestic violence. Punishments for such crimes were increased, police powers to intervene in potentially dangerous situations were expanded, and funding for shelters and support programs for violence victims was increased. New educational programs aimed at fostering respect, equality, and nonviolent communication were implemented in schools across Greece. These initiatives were designed to prevent the formation of toxic relationships from an early age. The last video Caroline posted on Instagram shows her on the beach near her home, joyfully lifting her daughter Lydia and kissing her on the cheek. This touching reminder of a mother's love for her child and a life prematurely cut short remains a symbol of what was lost and a reminder of the need to fight domestic violence so that similar tragedies do not recur in the future. Caroline Crouch's life, though tragically short, left a profound impact. Her story continues to inspire people to fight for justice, protect the vulnerable, and create a society free from violence. In the memory of those who knew her, and those who learned about her after her death, Caroline remains a symbol of strength, love, and hope for a better future. In the city of Holiday, a suburb of Salt Lake City, Utah, Toni Marie Baird was born. From early childhood, she stood out with her charisma and zest for life. A blonde with bright blue eyes, Toni always attracted attention with her genuine smile. Her parents, Dana Anderson and Casey Baird, divorced when Toni was only 1 year old but maintained a friendly relationship for their daughter's sake. Toni grew up in an atmosphere of love and support. Her father, Casey, recalled that his daughter always had many friends who were drawn to her. She was a natural leader, able to unite people around her. At school, Toni quickly became popular, had a wide circle of friends, and numerous admirers. Meanwhile, in another part of Utah, in the city of Ogden, Victoria Ashley Mendoza was growing up. Her life was strikingly different from Toni's. Victoria was born into a family of immigrants from Mexico who lived in poverty. When Victoria was only 10 years old, her father committed suicide, which became a turning point in her life. After her father's death, Victoria's behavior changed dramatically. She began running away from home, skipping school, and getting into fights. She had problems with the law and was repeatedly sent to juvenile detention centers. 2 years before meeting Toni, Victoria had 12 court warnings and 8 contempt of court charges. Despite her troubled past, Victoria had her own appeal. She was slim, with soft facial features, but her street wisdom and tough character gave her a special charm that attracted many teenagers. While Victoria struggled with the consequences of a difficult childhood, Toni lived an ordinary suburban teenager's life. She studied at Salt Lake City College and worked as an assistant accountant. Toni had ambitious dreams. She wanted to become a famous singer and dreamed of living in California by the ocean. It seemed that the paths of these two girls would never cross. But fate had other plans. When Toni turned 17, she found herself in a situation that radically changed her life. One evening, Toni was riding in a car with a group of older friends, smoking marijuana. They were stopped by a police officer who searched the vehicle. Drugs and paraphernalia were found in the back seat. Realizing that her friends, being older, could receive more severe punishment, Toni took the blame. This act, dictated by loyalty to her friends, had serious consequences. Toni was charged with possession of controlled substances, which under Utah law is considered a serious offense. Her father, Casey, concerned about the situation and having his own experience with addiction, tried to influence the situation through his daughter's probation officer. However, the justice system proved unyielding. As a result, Toni was placed under the custody of the Division of Child and Family Services and placed in foster care with her aunt. She was subsequently sent to a youth treatment center for 90 days. For a girl from a well-off family, this was a real shock. She found herself surrounded by teenagers with serious problems, including gang members and drug addicts. The first days at the center were extremely difficult for Toni. Her mother recalls how her daughter constantly cried on the phone. Toni, who was used to the comfort of home life, found herself in a completely foreign and hostile environment. But it was here, in the most unexpected place, that she met the person who would change her entire life, Victoria Mendoza. At the Youth Treatment Center, Toni and Victoria quickly found common ground. For Victoria, this wasn't her first time in such a facility, and she took on the role of protector and guide for Toni in this new world. Toni, who felt lost and scared, found in Victoria a source of strength and confidence. Despite the obvious differences in their backgrounds and characters, the girls discovered that they were united by a shared passion for music. Both loved writing psalm lyrics and dreamed of a career in the music industry. This shared love became the foundation of their growing closeness. During their stay at the center, Victoria received devastating news. Her mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of breast cancer. Toni became her support during this difficult period, which further strengthened their bond. When the time came for a parent visit, Toni introduced Victoria to her mother, Dana. It was then that Toni came out, informing her mother about her sexual orientation and that Victoria was her girlfriend. Dana, demonstrating unconditional love and acceptance, supported her daughter in her choice. After completing the 90-day term, Toni was released from the center. Over the next month, the girls maintained contact through letters. In one of them, Victoria wrote a phrase that later proved prophetic: "If you sleep with anyone else besides me, I might kill you. I'm serious." When it was time for Victoria's release, Toni, along with her father Casey, came to pick her up. Casey later recalled that he immediately felt some apprehension about his daughter's new friend. Victoria was strikingly different from Toni's usual circle, and something about her caused Casey to feel uneasy. However, understanding the importance of this relationship for his daughter, he decided to accept her choice. Instead of returning home to her sick mother, Victoria went to live with Toni's family. Dana and Casey opened their home to Victoria, trying to create a safe and supportive environment for her. Toni introduced Victoria to her friends, particularly her best friend Lacey. The first meeting left mixed impressions. Lacey noticed that Victoria was a bit rough around the edges, but also noted the strong connection between the girls. In the first months of their relationship, everything seemed perfect. Toni and Victoria were inseparable, spending every free minute together. Their social media profiles were filled with photos of a happy couple that looked stylish and in love. However, behind the facade of the perfect relationship, troubling signs gradually began to appear. Victoria showed signs of jealousy and insecurity. She was particularly sensitive to the attention Toni received from boys. Unlike the self-confident Toni, Victoria constantly felt threatened by other people. Toni's friends began to notice changes in her behavior. She started communicating less with her former acquaintances, especially with boys. Some friends began to drift away, not wanting to be involved in the complicated relationship. Others, like Lacey, decided to stay close, trying to support their friend. Lacey quickly realized that it was better not to anger Victoria. She had a short fuse and could react sharply to the slightest provocation. This created an atmosphere of tension even during ordinary friendly gatherings. Despite these warning signs, Toni seemed blindly devoted to Victoria. She justified her behavior, explaining to friends and family that Victoria just needed love and understanding because of her difficult past. In June 2012, 2 years after the start of their relationship, Victoria's mother died of cancer. This was another blow for Victoria, who was now left without parents and without a job. Toni's family, especially her parents Dana and Casey, supported Victoria during this difficult period. They invited her to live with them permanently, essentially accepting her as a family member. After Victoria's mother's death, the relationship between the girls became even more intense. Victoria was completely dependent on Toni and her family, which intensified her fear of loss. This led to an escalation of her controlling behavior and jealousy. Toni, who had always been friendly and sociable, now found herself under constant surveillance by Victoria. Every contact she had with other people, especially boys, provoked a violent reaction from Victoria. She demanded constant explanations from Toni about her communication and whereabouts. Despite this, Toni continued to present their relationship as ideal on social media. Photos of the couple hugging, relaxing together, or attending parties created an illusion of a happy and carefree life. However, the reality was quite different. Toni's grandmother later noted that the couple's relationship had become very codependent and unhealthy. Victoria was jealous of Toni's relationships with other people, but skillfully masked her behavior in front of Toni's family. The situation reached a critical point when one day Toni returned home with a split lip and a missing front tooth. Dana, Toni's mother, immediately understood that this was Victoria's doing and declared her intention to call the police. However, Toni begged her mother not to do so, fearing that Victoria, who had already reached adulthood, would receive a severe punishment. Casey, Toni's father, noticing his daughter's injuries and scratches on Victoria's face, suspected that something serious was happening. But the couple insisted that the injuries were received during a fight at a party, and the topic was closed. Toni's grandmother recalled, "Victoria knew how to manipulate all of us. She knew what to say." After the incident with the knocked-out tooth, Toni's best friend Lacey was sure that this would be the turning point and Toni would finally leave Victoria. But Toni acted as if nothing had happened, and the couple continued to be together. By 2014, Toni and Victoria had been together for 5 years. They often traveled to Ogden to visit Victoria's relatives. Ogden had a reputation as a dangerous city with problems of gangs, crime, and drugs. It was during one of these trips that an event occurred that led to a tragic outcome. On October 17, 2014, the girls, along with Lacey, attended a party in Ogden. Throughout the evening, Victoria spent a lot of time in the bathroom and then suddenly insisted that everyone leave. The evening ended prematurely, and the girls got into the car to return home. Victoria sat in the back seat, still clearly angry about something that seemed incomprehensible to others. Toni drove Lacey home. "I love you," Lacey said goodbye. "I love you too," Toni replied. This was the last time the best friends saw each other. What happened next remains not fully understood, but according to Victoria, another argument broke out between her and Toni. This time Victoria pulled out a knife. She began stabbing Toni while she was driving. Toni managed to pull into a parking lot. There Victoria continued the attack, inflicting a total of almost 50 wounds on Toni. After this, Victoria called several people, including her friend Aaron, shortly after midnight on October 18th. She told him about what had happened. The police received the call and went to the scene. It remains unclear who exactly made the 911 call, but it is believed to have been someone Victoria had called. When law enforcement arrived at the scene, Victoria confessed that she had taken a 4-inch folding knife from her front pocket and struck Toni in a fit of anger during an argument. When asked by the police about the location of the weapon, she replied that the knife was still in the car. Toni was found in a car with numerous stab wounds all over her body. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation established that Victoria had moved Toni's body to the passenger seat and driven some distance before calling her friend. News of the tragedy spread quickly. On the morning of October 18th, Lacey called Dana, Toni's mother, and asked her to check her daughter's room. The room was empty, Toni's car was gone. Lacey reported that she had heard about something terrible that had happened to Toni. Around 10 o'clock in the morning, a police car stopped near the Baird family house. Dana was informed that her daughter, Toni, had been killed. Brutally murdered by the girl whom the family had welcomed into their home and supported in every way. The autopsy report showed that Tony had received 46 stab wounds at the hands of Victoria. The wounds were on her arms, forearms, face, head, neck, chest, and ears. Although none of the wounds was fatal on its own, Tony died from shock and blood loss. Experts noted that if Victoria had called an ambulance and tried to stop the bleeding, Tony might have been saved. Victoria Mendoza was arrested and placed in Weber County Jail. She was charged with first-degree murder. Initially, her bail was set at $100,000, but it was later canceled, and Victoria was denied the right to release on bail. During the preliminary hearing in February 2015, Victoria pleaded not guilty. She claimed that Tony had hit her, pulled her hair, and that she feared for her life. Her lawyer stated that she was in a state of stress and anxiety. During one of several outbursts of anger in court, Victoria stated that everyone was against her and that she was being threatened by the victim's family. At another moment, she said, "I'll just kill myself. Then you won't have to worry about me." In a final display of self-pity, addressing the Baird family, she complained about hurt feelings. "Everything they said really hurts me." On November 10, 2015, given the compelling evidence against her, Victoria's lawyer advised her to change her plea to guilty. Prosecutors noted that it remained unclear exactly what had happened in the car. Although Victoria initially claimed that she was driving the car at the time of the attack, the nature of the knife wounds on the right side of Tony's body indicated that Tony herself was behind the wheel. A trail of blood on the dashboard showed that at some point Victoria had moved from the driver's seat to the passenger seat. During the sentencing, Victoria Mendoza's sister, Cindy Spencer, gave testimony. She recounted that Victoria had called her and said she had harmed Tony. Cindy and her husband came to the church parking lot where Victoria pointed out the car. According to Spencer, her sister was in shock. Defense attorney Michael Studebaker asked who had the upper hand in the relationship. Spencer replied, "Tony, because she had a car, phone, and was receiving money from her family." She also claimed that they were using prescription drugs and marijuana, although only marijuana was found in their systems. In her final statement, Victoria admitted, "I'm the only monster here." But her words seemed hollow. The truth came out when she, trying to sound remorseful, said, "I'm suffering too." In a room full of people whose lives she had destroyed, she couldn't help but remind everyone that she, Victoria, mattered too. During the victim impact statements, Tony's father pleaded for life imprisonment. Her aunt asked why Victoria should get even one more day with trees and sun when Tony couldn't. The court sentenced Victoria to imprisonment for 16 years to life for the murder of Tony Marie Baird. The judge explained that his hands were tied since the murder was not premeditated. Victoria is currently serving her sentence in Utah State Prison. Her first chance for parole is scheduled for October 2039. Tony's father, Casey, said, "I don't want the death penalty. I want her to suffer and have a lot of time to think about this. She's killing me too, very slowly. She should be tried again for the slow death of Tony's father and mother. I'll make sure she never sees the light of day again. She took my only girl." In 2020, Victoria found a new audience on TikTok and YouTube while in prison. Someone outside the prison was recording her calls and posting them on these platforms. She thanked her followers for their support. Utah State Prison removed these accounts. The tragic story of Tony Baird and Victoria Mendoza raises many questions about the nature of toxic relationships, domestic violence, and the juvenile justice system. Analyzing this case, several key points can be highlighted that require society's attention. First and foremost, this story demonstrates how early traumas and a difficult childhood can affect a person's behavior in the future. Victoria, who experienced her father's suicide and poverty, developed a number of behavioral problems that ultimately led to tragedy. This underscores the importance of early intervention and support for children with traumatic pasts. Secondly, the case shows how difficult it can be to recognize signs of abusive relationships, especially in the context of same-sex couples. Tony's friends and family noticed alarming signals but often didn't know how to respond properly. This points to the need for better education about signs of domestic violence and ways to intervene. The juvenile justice system also deserves critical analysis. The initial decision to place Tony, who had no serious offenses, in the same facility with teenagers with more serious problems, may have been a mistake. This decision effectively brought her together with Victoria, which ultimately led to tragic consequences. The role of social media in this story also deserves attention. Tony and Victoria used platforms to create an illusion of a perfect relationship, which made it difficult for others to recognize real problems. This emphasizes the need for a critical attitude towards what we see on social media and the importance of personal communication for understanding the real state of affairs. The Baird family's reaction to Tony's relationship with Victoria demonstrates the complexity of balancing support for a child's choice and protecting them from potential danger. Tony's parents tried to be open and accepting, but this may have prevented them from recognizing dangerous aspects of this relationship in time. The case also raises questions about how society views female violence. It is often believed that women are less prone to violent behavior, which can lead to underestimating risks in relationships between women. Victoria's attempts to use social media from prison point to the need for better regulation of prisoners' access to these platforms, especially in cases where it can cause additional pain to victims' families. The story of Tony and Victoria also highlights the importance of psychological help for people who have experienced trauma or have mental health problems. If Victoria had received proper help earlier, perhaps the tragedy could have been prevented. Finally, this case demonstrates how easily young people can fall into toxic relationships, especially when they are in a vulnerable state. This underscores the need for better education for teenagers about healthy relationships and recognizing signs of violence. Tony Baird's legacy continues to impact many lives. Her tragic death became a catalyst for discussing issues of domestic violence and toxic relationships in the LGBTQ+ community. Some organizations use her story to teach young people to recognize early signs of abusive relationships. The Baird family, despite their pain, is trying to use this tragedy for positive change. They participate in domestic violence prevention programs and support initiatives aimed at helping young people in difficult life situations. Tony's friends, especially Lacey, have become active advocates for changes in the juvenile justice system and in approaches to combating domestic violence. They share their experiences to help others recognize warning signs in their loved ones' relationships. Schools and colleges in Utah have begun to pay more attention to education on healthy relationships and recognizing signs of violence. Tony's story is often used as an example of how important it is to be attentive to changes in the behavior of friends and loved ones. Law enforcement agencies and social services have revised their protocols for responding to cases of domestic violence, especially in the context of same-sex couples. Increased attention is paid to training employees to recognize less obvious forms of violence and control. Almost 10 years have passed since that tragic day when Tony Baird's life was cut short. Much has changed during this time, but her memory continues to live on. Victoria Mendoza is now serving her sentence in Utah State Prison. Her first chance for parole will come only in 2039 when she will be 47 years old. During her imprisonment, Victoria has gone through several rehabilitation and psychological assistance programs. However, her attempts to use social media from prison have caused new controversies and pain for the Baird family. Tony's family continues to struggle with the loss. Dana and Casey Baird have become active participants in the movement against domestic violence. They regularly speak at events, sharing their daughter's story, trying to prevent similar tragedies in the future. Their work has helped many families recognize signs of toxic relationships and intervene in time. Lacey, Tony's best friend, founded a non-profit organization that works with teenagers, teaching them to recognize signs of unhealthy relationships. She often mentions Tony in her speeches, talking about how important it is to trust your intuition and not ignore warning signs. Utah state legislation has undergone changes after this tragedy. New laws have been passed that strengthen penalties for domestic violence and expand support programs for victims. Special attention is paid to training law enforcement officers and social workers to recognize signs of violence in LGBTQ+ couples. The juvenile justice system in the state has also undergone reforms. Now more attention is paid to an individual approach to each case, with the aim of avoiding situations where teenagers with minor offenses end up in the same facility as those who have serious problems with the law. Tony's story has become part of the curriculum in Utah schools and colleges. It is used as an example of how quickly relationships can turn from romantic to dangerous, and how important it is to seek help in time. Social networks, which played a significant role in creating the illusion of an ideal relationship between Tony and Victoria, are now actively used to spread information about signs of abusive relationships. Campaigns on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook help young people recognize warning signs in their own and others' relationships. Tony's musical legacy also lives on. Her friends collected and published a compilation of psalms she had written. These psalms have become a symbol of unrealized potential and a reminder of the importance of protecting young talents from violence. The tragedy of Tony Baird has left a deep mark on the hearts of many people. It reminds us of the fragility of human life and how quickly toxic relationships can grow into something much more terrifying. But at the same time, her story has become a catalyst for positive changes, prompting society to pay more attention to the problem of domestic violence and the importance of healthy relationships. Tony's memory lives on not only in the memories of her loved ones but also in the lives that were saved thanks to increased awareness about domestic violence. Her story continues to teach us to value every moment of life and to be attentive to those around us. In a world where social media often creates an illusion of perfect life, Tony's story reminds us of the importance of genuine, deep connections and support. It calls on us to be more open, sensitive, and ready to help those who may find themselves in dangerous situations.
Hello, dear friends. Welcome to Crime Story Diaries. Today, we'll be examining a terrifying case, so I invite you to watch the video. Don't forget to leave your comments and likes. On November 3, 2006, what began as an ordinary autumn day in suburban Raleigh, the capital of North Carolina, would soon turn extraordinary. Birchleaf Drive, nestled in a quiet residential area, was typically a place where life unfolded peacefully and predictably. The houses, surrounded by well-maintained lawns and mature trees, exuded a sense of comfort and security. However, the neighborhood's peaceful atmosphere was shattered. Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Meredith Fisher arrived at her sister Michelle Young's house. She entered through the garage, the door of which lifted easily by hand. Inside, Meredith immediately sensed that something was amiss. The house was unusually cold, and an ominous silence hung in the air. Upon ascending to the second floor, Meredith made a shocking discovery. Her sister Michelle lay motionless on the bedroom floor, surrounded by pools of blood. This horrific sight would forever change not only the lives of the Young family, but also the entire Raleigh community. Michelle Young, born Michelle Mary Fisher, came into the world on February 17, 1977, in Sayville, New York. From an early age, she exhibited traits that would later shape her personality, energy, determination, and optimism. As she grew up, Michelle dreamed of a career in finance, particularly aspiring to become a tax attorney. This dream would define her path for many years to come. In school, she excelled academically, and was the captain of the cheerleading squad, demonstrating not only academic prowess, but also leadership qualities. Friends and family described Michelle as the all-American girl, cheerful, energetic, and full of enthusiasm. Her childhood was filled with ambitions and a drive for success, which later led her to enroll at North Carolina State University. After graduating from high school, Michelle enrolled at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, taking an important step towards her dream. Moving from the bustling New York to the relatively smaller Raleigh was a significant change in her life. However, Michelle quickly adapted, focusing on her studies in finance. Throughout her 4 years of college, Michelle demonstrated high work ethic and perseverance. Her efforts paid off. She earned a master's degree in accounting. This diploma opened up wide opportunities for her in the financial world. Soon after graduation, Michelle secured a job at a local accounting firm. This position not only provided her with financial stability, but also served as an excellent starting point for further career growth. Michelle quickly established herself as a competent and responsible employee. In February 2001, on the eve of her 24th birthday, Michelle decided to celebrate the occasion with friends at her favorite bar. It was there that a meeting occurred that would change her entire life. Jason Young, a graduate of the same university as Michelle, accidentally knocked over her glass of wine. This awkward moment became the beginning of their acquaintance. Jason apologized and bought Michelle a new drink, after which they struck up a conversation. It turned out they had a lot in common. Both had graduated from North Carolina State University and were passionate fans of the local football team, the Wolf Pack. Jason worked as a sales representative and was known for his charisma and self-confidence. Despite Jason's reputation as a ladies' man, his interest in Michelle seemed genuine. After this meeting, he began to visit Raleigh more frequently, using business trips as an excuse for dates with Michelle. Michelle and Jason's relationship developed rapidly. Despite Michelle's focus on her career and Jason's reputation as immature and impulsive, their feelings grew into a serious relationship. 2 years after they met, Michelle discovered she was pregnant. This news came as a surprise to both of them. Michelle, who had always dreamed of a traditional wedding, hadn't planned on having a child so early. Jason initially stated that he wasn't ready for either children or marriage. However, after a month of deliberation, the couple decided to get married. In August 2003, their wedding took place. Although the decision to marry was partly driven by practical considerations, particularly the need for medical insurance for Michelle, it also reflected their desire to start a family. On March 29, 2004, their daughter, Cassidy Elizabeth Young, was born. Michelle fully devoted herself to motherhood, finding in it a new calling. Soon after Cassidy's birth, the Young family moved into a large house on Birchleaf Drive on the outskirts of Raleigh. It seemed like the embodiment of the American dream, a spacious home surrounded by greenery in a quiet neighborhood. However, it was here that the first signs of problems in their marriage began to surface. Michelle enjoyed her role as a mother and wife. Her sister Meredith moved to Raleigh to help with Cassidy's care. Michelle's relatives, especially her mother Linda, frequently visited the Youngs' house. However, these visits irritated Jason. Tension between Jason and Linda grew. Michelle talked to her mother on the phone daily, sharing details of her life, including problems in her relationship with her husband. This caused additional displeasure for Jason. The couple often argued, and these conflicts were no secret to friends and family. Jason had a hot temper, and Michelle increasingly complained to her mother about his behavior. Despite this, in the spring of 2006, Michelle shared joyful news with Jason: she was pregnant again. In the fall of 2006, when Michelle was 4 months pregnant, the Young family's life seemed outwardly calm. However, hidden problems were growing beneath the surface. Jason, working as a sales representative, often went on business trips. Some of these trips, as it later turned out, had nothing to do with his work. In October, Jason went on a business trip to Florida. In reality, he was visiting an old friend named Michelle Money, with whom he had studied at university. They struck up a romance that quickly developed into a serious relationship. Over the next month, they exchanged almost 1,000 messages. Michelle was unaware of her husband's infidelity. She was focused on her pregnancy and caring for Cassidy. However, tension in the family was increasing. Conflicts between Jason and Michelle's mother, Linda, were becoming more frequent. Linda often stayed with them and even expressed a desire to move closer to her daughter, which caused Jason's displeasure. On the evening of November 2nd, 2006, Jason set out on another business trip to Clintwood, Virginia, where he had a business meeting scheduled for the morning of November 3rd. The distance to Clintwood was about 300 miles, so Jason decided to stop for the night at the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, approximately halfway. That evening, Michelle invited her friend Shelley over. The women spent time watching a TV show and talking. Michelle shared with her friend some problems in her relationship with Jason, particularly regarding holiday plans. Shelley left around 10 o'clock in the evening, feeling somewhat uncomfortable, as if someone was watching her. Jason checked into the hotel at 10:54 p.m. and entered his room at 10:56 p.m. According to the electronic key data, he did not leave the room again that night. However, the events that followed became the subject of intense investigation and court proceedings over the next few years. On November 3rd, 2006, around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Meredith Fisher arrived at her sister's house. Jason had asked her to pick up some eBay printouts he had supposedly left in the home office. Entering through the unlocked garage, Meredith immediately felt that something was wrong. The house was unusually cold. In the kitchen, Meredith saw Michelle's purse and keys. Climbing to the second floor, she made a horrifying discovery. Michelle was lying face down on the bedroom floor, surrounded by pools of blood. The body was cold and stiff. Meredith immediately called emergency services. While talking to the operator, she noticed 2-year-old Cassidy crawling out from under the bed, dressed in clean pink pajamas. The child seemed confused but physically unharmed. Police quickly arrived at the scene. Investigators found that Michelle had suffered numerous blows to the head with a blunt object. An autopsy later confirmed that the cause of death was a traumatic brain injury. Michelle's body had numerous bruises, scratches, and fractures. She had lost several teeth, and a subarachnoid hemorrhage was found on her brain. Investigators immediately turned their attention to the victim's husband, Jason Young. This was standard procedure, as statistics showed that in about 60% of murder cases, victims knew their killers, and in spousal cases, the partner was always the first suspect. Jason claimed he was on a business trip in Virginia. According to his version, he left home on the evening of November 2nd, stopped for the night at the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, and set out for a business meeting in Clintwood on the morning of November 3rd. Hotel records confirmed that Jason checked in around 11 o'clock on the evening of November 2nd. The electronic key to his room was used only once to enter the room. This seemed to confirm his alibi. However, investigators uncovered several suspicious details. A hotel employee noticed that the emergency exit door on the first floor was propped open with a small red pebble at night. Moreover, the surveillance camera near these doors was disconnected at around 11:19 p.m. and remained inoperative until morning. During the investigation, unpleasant details of Jason Young's personal life came to light. Investigators discovered that he had several extramarital affairs. Particular attention was drawn to his relationship with Michelle Money, an old acquaintance of the Youngs from their college days. It was revealed that Jason and Michelle Money had exchanged nearly 1,000 messages during October 2006. On the day before the murder, they contacted each other 51 times. Moreover, Michelle Money was the last person Jason communicated with on November 2nd, and the first he called on the morning of November 3rd. Another woman, Carol Ann Sowerby, confessed to having an intimate relationship with Jason 10 days before Michelle's death. She recounted a strange incident where Jason removed her wedding ring and returned it only the next day. Michelle's friends and relatives also shared their observations. They spoke of frequent arguments between the couple, especially regarding visits from Michelle's mother, Linda. It became known that Jason was not happy about either Michelle's first or second pregnancy. At the crime scene, investigators faced a complex picture of evidence. In the bedroom where Michelle's body was found, 2 different shoe prints were discovered, size 10 and size 12 in the American system. Forensic experts carefully examined these prints, using special lighting and photographic techniques to enhance the visibility of the impressions. Thanks to the clear pattern on the soles, they were even able to determine the specific model of shoes. They were sneakers of a popular brand sold in many stores across the country. 2 small hairs were found on and near Michelle's body that didn't belong to either her or Jason. These hairs were carefully collected, packaged, and sent to the laboratory for DNA analysis. The results showed that the DNA from the hairs didn't match the profiles of anyone in Michelle's immediate circle. 4 DNA samples were found on the jewelry box that also didn't belong to the young couple. These findings raised many questions. Could they belong to the perpetrator, or were they traces left by guests long before the crime? Several unidentified fingerprints were found in various parts of the house. Experts compared them with the fingerprint database, but found no matches. This could mean that the criminal had no prior convictions, or that these prints belonged to one of the house visitors. Jason's computer drew special attention from investigators. When analyzing the search history, they found suspicious queries such as anatomy of a knockout, loss of consciousness from traumatic brain injury, and similar topics. Digital forensics experts tried to establish the exact time of these searches, but faced technical difficulties. It remained unclear whether these searches were related to the crime or had another explanation. Investigators also noted the absence of Michelle's wedding and engagement rings. They thoroughly searched the house, but didn't find these valuable items. At the same time, other jewelry and money remained untouched, ruling out the version of a common robbery. This detail seemed particularly important, considering the testimony about Jason previously removing a ring from his mistress's finger. Forensic experts conducted a detailed analysis of the blood spatter pattern on the walls and furniture in the bedroom. They used special techniques to reconstruct the trajectory of the blows and the attacker's position. This data helped create an approximate picture of how the attack occurred, but didn't give a definitive answer about the perpetrator's identity. Despite a significant amount of physical evidence, the investigation failed to find anything that directly linked Jason to the murder. No traces of Michelle's blood were found in his car, on his clothes, or in his hotel room. Jason's fingerprints in the house were expected and contained no traces of blood. Experts also analyzed surveillance camera recordings on the route between the hotel where Jason stayed and the Youngs' house. They tried to find confirmation of his alibi, or conversely, evidence of his return home on the night of the murder. However, due to the limited number of cameras on the highway and the low quality of night recordings, these searches didn't yield conclusive results. Such a complex and ambiguous picture of evidence created serious difficulties for the investigation. On one hand, there were many suspicious circumstances pointing to Jason's possible involvement in the crime. On the other hand, the lack of direct evidence of his guilt left room for doubt. This situation posed a challenging task for the prosecution: how to convince the jury of the suspect's guilt, relying primarily on circumstantial evidence. Despite the lack of direct evidence, investigators continued to focus their attention on Jason Young. For 3 years after the murder, law enforcement meticulously gathered and analyzed all possible evidence. On December 14, 2009, 3 years after Michelle's death, Jason Young was finally arrested on charges of first-degree murder. This decision was based on a combination of circumstantial evidence and suspicious circumstances. Preparation for the trial lasted almost 2 more years. During this time, the prosecution tried to build a compelling case against Jason, relying on available evidence and testimonies. The first trial of Jason Young began in June 2011. The prosecution presented a theory according to which Jason had planned his wife's murder due to financial difficulties and a desire to leave the marriage. The prosecution argued that after checking into the Hampton Inn in Hillsville, Virginia, Jason secretly left the hotel at night, returned to Raleigh, committed the murder, and then returned. They argued that he interfered with the hotel's surveillance cameras and made a stop at a gas station between Hillsville and Raleigh. The testimony of a gas station employee became a key element of the prosecution. She claimed that around 5 o'clock in the morning on November 3rd, a man in a white SUV stopped at the farthest pump. After an argument about payment, he threw $20, filled up for $15, and left without taking the change. The woman identified Jason in a photograph. The defense insisted on the absence of direct evidence of Jason's guilt. They argued that it was physically impossible to make such a journey, commit murder, and return unnoticed in such a short period of time. After lengthy deliberations, the jury was unable to reach a unanimous decision. The judge was forced to declare a mistrial. No verdict was reached, which meant the need for a new trial. Parallel to the criminal process, Michelle Young's family filed a civil lawsuit against Jason. Unlike criminal court, where evidence beyond reasonable doubt is required, civil cases demand less stringent standards of proof. Jason completely ignored this lawsuit, refusing to participate in the process. This decision played against him. After reviewing the available evidence, the judge concluded that Jason was indeed responsible for Michelle's death. As a result of the civil process, Jason was ordered to pay $15.5 million to the deceased's family. Although this decision had no direct impact on the criminal case, it significantly influenced public opinion and created additional pressure on Jason. After the unsuccessful attempt to reach a verdict in the first trial, the prosecution got an opportunity to review their strategy and prepare for a retrial. The second trial of Jason Young began in February 2012, almost 5.5 years after Michelle's murder. This time, the prosecution approached the case with new tactics. Firstly, they managed to obtain the court's permission to use the results of the civil lawsuit against Jason as an argument in favor of his guilt. Although this decision sparked controversy among lawyers, the judge deemed it admissible, arguing that the jury had the right to know about all relevant circumstances of the case. Moreover, during the preparation for the new trial, investigators uncovered new information that could be crucial to the case. It was discovered that a year before the murder, Jason had purchased shoes with the same sole pattern as the bloody footprint found in Michelle's room. These shoes were never found, which raised suspicions among investigators. Prosecutors presented this fact as evidence that Jason might have disposed of potential evidence. Prosecutors also focused on building a more detailed psychological profile of Jason. They brought in a behavioral analysis expert who studied Jason's relationship history, his behavior before and after the murder, and presented his findings to the court. This expertise aimed to show that Jason had a predisposition to violent behavior and deception. An important element of the new prosecution strategy was the involvement of additional witnesses. Jason's former fiancée, Genevieve Cargol, agreed to testify. She spoke about instances of domestic violence by Jason, particularly an incident at a wedding in Texas where a drunk Jason forcibly removed her ring during an argument. This testimony was intended to demonstrate to the jury that Jason was capable of aggressive actions towards those close to him. Prosecutors also paid more attention to analyzing phone calls and messages between Jason and his mistress, Michelle Money. They presented a detailed chronology of their communication in the days before and after the murder, trying to show that Jason had a motive to get rid of his wife for the sake of a new relationship. Digital forensics experts conducted additional analysis of Jason's computer, attempting to establish the exact time of suspicious search queries. Although they couldn't obtain definitive results, they were able to narrow down the time frame in which these searches were made, strengthening suspicions about their connection to the crime. Jason's defense, in turn, prepared counter-arguments for each point of the prosecution. They insisted that all evidence against their client was circumstantial and could have alternative explanations. Jason's lawyers also tried to discredit his former fiancée's testimony, claiming she might have personal motives for providing negative characterizations. Preparation for the second trial was intensive and comprehensive. Both sides understood that this might be the last chance to resolve the case in court. The prosecution was determined to achieve a conviction, while the defense sought to prove Jason's innocence, or at least sow enough doubt in the minds of the jurors. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense. The public and media closely followed every step of the process, understanding its importance not only for Michelle's and Jason's families, but also for the entire justice system. This trial was to be decisive in the long and complex case of Michelle Young's murder. The second trial lasted several weeks. The jurors carefully listened to all evidence and testimonies. Unlike the first trial, this time they managed to reach a unanimous decision. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury found Jason Young guilty of first-degree murder. The court sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Reaction to the verdict was mixed. Michelle's family and friends felt relief, believing that justice had finally prevailed. However, some observers expressed doubts about the sufficiency of evidence for such a severe sentence. After the verdict was announced, Jason Young's lawyers immediately began working on an appeal. They argued that the trial court had made several errors that affected the fairness of the process. One of the main arguments of the defense was that the judge allowed the jury to learn about the results of the civil lawsuit against Jason. The lawyers believed that this information could have unfairly influenced the jury's decision. The Court of Appeals agreed with the defense's arguments and overturned the verdict, ordering a new trial. However, before a third trial could begin, the state Supreme Court reviewed this decision and upheld the original verdict. Meanwhile, little Cassidy, who lost her mother and effectively her father, was being raised by her Aunt Meredith and other relatives of Michelle. The family tried to provide the girl with a normal childhood despite the tragic circumstances. The case of Michelle Young left a deep mark on the Raleigh community and beyond. It drew attention to issues of domestic violence and the complexities of investigating crimes without direct evidence. Many in Raleigh still remember Michelle as a vibrant young woman, a devoted mother, and a successful professional. Her tragic death became a reminder of vulnerability, even in seemingly safe suburbs. The case also sparked discussions in legal circles about the role of circumstantial evidence in criminal trials. Some experts believed that Jason's verdict was fair, considering the totality of circumstances. Others expressed concern about establishing guilt based primarily on circumstantial evidence. Michelle's family continued to fight to preserve her memory. They established the Michelle Young Foundation, which provides support to victims of domestic violence and their children. Cassidy, Michelle, and Jason's daughter, grew up under the care of her mother's family. They made every effort to ensure she had a normal childhood, protecting her from excessive media attention to the tragic story of her parents. The case of Michelle Young remains a subject of interest for criminologists and law students. It is often used as an example of the complexity of investigation and prosecution in cases without direct evidence. Despite the verdict, some questions remained unanswered. The identity of the woman allegedly seen in Jason's car on the night of the murder was never established. This gave rise to theories about the possible involvement of other persons in the crime, although the prosecution never officially considered this version. This case also drew attention to the importance of technical evidence in modern criminal investigations. Surveillance camera footage, electronic key data, and computer information became key elements in constructing the picture of the crime. Over the years since the verdict, Jason's supporters continued to insist on his innocence. They created websites and support groups, claiming he had become a victim of a miscarriage of justice. However, for most Raleigh residents, the case of Michelle Young remains a tragic reminder of how quickly a seemingly perfect life can be shattered. It forced many to rethink their relationships and be more attentive to signs of problems in the families of friends and neighbors. Traditionally, thank you for watching and remind you that it would be great if you support the video by liking and subscribing to the channel.
In the world of social media, where anyone can create an ideal image of their life, April Holt's story unveils a dark reality often hidden behind bright filters and happy posts. A young mother of two, successful entrepreneur, and popular influencer with over 200,000 followers on TikTok, April seemed to embody the American dream. Her videos about positive thinking and manifesting success inspired thousands of people. But on July 28, 2023, this illusion of a perfect life shattered when April was found unconscious in the bathroom of her own home with a plastic bag over her head. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident or perhaps an act of desperation soon evolved into a convoluted story of betrayal, hidden violence, and a mother's relentless fight for justice. This case not only exposes the dark side of influencer life but also calls into question our ability to distinguish between reality and fiction in the era of social media. April Holt's story is a narrative about how a terrible truth can hide behind a perfect facade, and about the power of one person to change the course of justice. April Lynn Holt was born on July 6, 1994 in Altamonte Springs, Florida, to parents Dershun Hicks and Jamie Woods. She spent her childhood in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, where she grew into a vibrant and ambitious individual. April graduated from Riverdale High School in 2012, after which she began her journey towards professional success and recognition. As an adult, April chose a career as a lash technician, specializing in eyelash extensions. She demonstrated entrepreneurial skills by starting her own business and becoming self-employed. Her professional abilities and dedication to her craft quickly brought her success in this field. Alongside her career development, April actively built her presence on social media, especially on the TikTok platform. Her account quickly gained popularity, reaching over 200,000 followers. April created content focused on positive thinking, spiritual development, and coaching. She shared advice with her audience on personal growth, manifesting desired outcomes in life, and overcoming challenges. In her personal life, April became a mother to 2 children. Her older daughter, Serenity Dickerson, was born when April was still a teenager. Later, in her marriage to Donovan Holt, their son Denzel was born. April often showcased her family life on social media, creating an image of a happy family. April and Donovan's marriage was presented to the public as a love story that began with friendship and blossomed into a romantic relationship. They shared their life online, discussing the ups and downs of their married life. In their videos, they talked about the importance of communication, forgiveness, and personal growth within marriage. However, behind the scenes of their public image, the couple faced serious challenges. They went through a period of separation, financial difficulties, and struggled with depression. April, always optimistic, presented these difficulties as opportunities for growth and strengthening their relationship. In her videos, April openly talked about her challenging childhood, particularly her experience with homeschooling, which she described as a period of isolation from society. She shared how she overcame these difficulties in her teenage years, using her experiences to inspire others. Despite the outward appearance of success and happiness, April's close friends knew about problems in her marriage. 2 weeks before the tragic events that led to her death, April expressed a desire to divorce Donovan. This decision became a turning point in their relationship and possibly a catalyst for subsequent events. Despite the image of a perfect couple that April and Donovan created on social media, their marriage was far from ideal. Close friends and relatives knew about existing problems that the couple tried to hide from their online audience. The history of their relationship was complex. They started as friends, then became best friends, and eventually their friendship turned into a romantic relationship. They often presented this journey from friendship to love as the foundation of their marriage's strength. In their videos, they emphasized the importance of maintaining friendly relations even in the most difficult moments of married life. However, behind the scenes of this public image, the couple faced serious challenges. They went through a period of separation that lasted 3 years. They later described this time apart as an opportunity for personal growth and re-evaluation of their relationship. After reuniting, they tried to present their experience as an example of how to overcome difficulties and strengthen a marriage. Financial problems were also a source of tension in their relationship. Despite April's success as a lash technician and influencer, the couple faced periods of financial instability. They tried to present these difficulties to their audience as trials that strengthened their bond. Additionally, both struggled with depression. April openly talked about her psychological problems in her videos, trying to use her experience to support others. She shared about periods when she felt depressed and overwhelmed, but always emphasized the importance of positive thinking and manifesting a better life. 2 weeks before the tragic events that led to her death, April made the decision to divorce. This wasn't the first attempt to end the marriage. Previously, the couple had already gone through a divorce process that led to their 3-year separation. However, this time April was more determined. The decision to divorce became a turning point in their relationship. Although they continued to publicly demonstrate the image of a friendly couple parting amicably, the tension between them was growing. April informed her mother, Jamie Dickerson, that this time she was firmly decided to leave Donovan for good. Donovan also seemed to realize the seriousness of the situation. A week before April's death, he pawned his wedding ring, which could be seen as a symbolic gesture of accepting the end of their marriage. Despite attempts to maintain a positive image in the eyes of their audience, internal conflicts in their marriage were becoming increasingly evident. The tension between them reached a critical point on July 28, 2023, a day that would forever change their family's life. July 28, 2023 began as a usual day for April Holt. According to her mother, Jamie Dickerson, April woke up early, had her morning coffee, and, as always, wrote in her journal. This was her usual morning routine that helped her set the tone for the day. April hugged and kissed her 7-year-old son Denzel, showing her love and affection for the child. That morning, April had a brief phone conversation with her mother. They discussed weekend plans, including the possibility of watching the Barbie movie together. However, April said she couldn't go to the cinema that day because Donovan had to work. They agreed to meet at church the next day. This conversation became the last one between mother and daughter. After this conversation, an argument broke out between April and Donovan. The details of their dispute remain unclear, but according to their son Denzel's testimony, he heard his parents arguing in the bathroom. The boy listened at the door, trying to understand what was going on, but couldn't make out the words. He saw both parents' feet under the bathroom door. After the argument, Donovan came out of the bathroom and took care of Denzel. He dressed his son and prepared food for him. About 2 hours after the initial argument, Donovan asked Denzel to check on his mother. When Denzel entered the bathroom, he encountered a horrific scene. He saw his mother lying on the bathroom floor with a plastic bag over her head. April was unconscious and not breathing. The frightened boy immediately reported this to his father. Donovan called for an ambulance. When paramedics arrived at the scene, they found April in critical condition. She was urgently taken to Southern Hills Hospital, where doctors fought for her life. Jamie Dickerson received the shocking call from Donovan just a few hours after her morning conversation with her daughter. He informed her that April had been urgently hospitalized and that her condition was critical. Jamie immediately went to the hospital, where she learned that her daughter had no brain activity and blood circulation to the brain had stopped. It's important to note that for the first 6 hours after the incident, neither Jamie or other family members were informed about the plastic bag found on April's head. This critical detail was revealed much later, raising suspicions in Jamie about the circumstances of the incident. Over the next few days, while April was in the hospital, Donovan returned to their apartment several times. The purpose of these visits remained unclear to Jamie, which later became another source of her suspicions. For 3 days, April fought for her life in the hospital. Doctors and family hoped for a miracle, but April's condition did not improve. On July 31, 2023, at the age of 29, April Holt was officially declared dead. April's death came as a shock to her family, friends, and numerous social media followers. A young mother of 2 children, a successful entrepreneur, and a popular influencer passed away under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind many questions and unresolved issues. April Holt's death raised many questions from the very beginning. The Nashville police started an investigation, but their initial conclusions were ambiguous and raised doubts in April's family, especially her mother, Jamie Dickerson. Initially, investigators leaned towards the version of suicide. The presence of a plastic bag on April's head and the absence of obvious signs of struggle or violence led them to this conclusion. However, Jamie Dickerson rejected this theory from the start. She was convinced that her daughter would never voluntarily leave her children. Jamie began her own investigation, carefully examining all available facts and testimonies. She drew attention to several key points that, in her opinion, contradicted the suicide version. 1. Timing. April had filed for divorce just 2 weeks before her death. Jamie believed this indicated her daughter's desire to start a new life, not end it. 2. Donovan's behavior. Jamie noted that Donovan's behavior at the hospital seemed strange to her. He didn't show the reaction one would expect from a husband whose wife is between life and death. 3. Return to the apartment. The fact that Donovan returned to their apartment several times after the incident raised suspicions in Jamie. 4. Denzel's testimony. The 7-year-old son's account of hearing his parents argue before the incident became an important element in Jamie's investigation. Jamie insisted on a thorough autopsy of April's body. When the autopsy results were released in November 2023, they didn't meet Jamie's expectations. The medical examiner concluded that the cause of death was asphyxiation but classified the death as suicide. This determination didn't satisfy Jamie. She drew attention to details that, in her opinion, contradicted the suicide version. There were noticeable bruises on April's body, and the autopsy report mentioned marks on her neck, thighs, and ankles. Particularly troubling was a deep cut on the inner side of April's thigh. Jamie continued to insist on a more thorough investigation. She reached out to local news channels, trying to draw public attention to her daughter's case. However, after the police officially closed the case, media interest quickly faded. Despite this, Jamie didn't give up. She filed an official complaint with the Nashville Civilian Oversight Board, demanding a full review of the case. This action forced the Nashville police to start a reinvestigation. For months after the start of the reinvestigation, the police presented a 47-page report. Although this report didn't change the official classification of April's death, it provided Jamie with a lot of new information to analyze. Jamie carefully studied every detail of the report, looking for any inconsistencies or omissions. She spent hours comparing different testimonies and analyzing the timeline of events on that fatal day. Parallel to her own investigation, Jamie fought for custody of her grandchildren. She believed that the children, especially Denzel, who witnessed the events of that day, needed a stable and safe environment. Jamie also used social media to draw attention to April's case. She regularly posted updates about the progress of the investigation and shared memories of her daughter. These posts quickly gained popularity, creating an online support community demanding justice for April. However, this social media activity had negative consequences. In April 2024, Jamie was forced to stop her posts about the case due to a court injunction. This was a serious blow to her efforts, but she didn't give up. Despite the ban, Jamie continued to work on the case behind the scenes. She consulted with lawyers, met with detectives, and continued to gather evidence. Her persistence and dedication to finding the truth became the driving force of the investigation. Gradually, thanks to Jamie's tireless efforts, April's case began to take a new turn. New evidence and testimonies began to emerge, casting doubt on the initial conclusions of the investigation. The turning point in the case came in September 2024, more than a year after April's death. Jamie Dickerson, despite the court injunction, continued her search for the truth. Her persistence finally brought results. A key element of the breakthrough was the fingerprints found on the plastic bag and tape that were wrapped around April's head. According to the report Jamie received, only one set of fingerprints was found on these items, and they didn't belong to April. These fingerprints matched Donovan Holt. Armed with this information, Jamie decided to confront her former son-in-law directly. In September, she met with Donovan and presented him with the evidence she had gathered. During this tense conversation, something unexpected happened. Donovan confessed. According to Jamie, Donovan told her that in a fit of anger during an argument, he strangled April. Then, trying to cover up his crime, he dragged her body into the shower, put a bag over her head, and secured it with tape. After that, he went to prepare lunch for their son before asking Denzel to check on his mother and call an ambulance. Jamie recorded this confession and immediately handed it over to the police. This new information forced law enforcement to review the case. A reanalysis of the autopsy results was conducted, and the conclusion was changed. April's death was now classified as murder. On September 20, 2024, the Nashville police announced the arrest of Donovan Holt. He was detained in San Antonio, Texas, where he had moved after April's death. According to the police report, Donovan confessed to detectives about murdering his wife. A grand jury indicted Donovan on charges of reckless homicide, tampering with evidence, and giving false testimony. He was extradited from Texas to Tennessee, where he was taken into custody with a bail set at $75,000. Donovan's arrest was the culmination of more than a year of Jamie's fight for justice. Her persistence, despite numerous obstacles, eventually led to a breakthrough in the case. News of Donovan's arrest spread quickly, causing a wave of reactions in the community. Many expressed support for April's family, especially her children and mother. Others discussed how the justice system could have initially missed such important evidence. For Jamie, Donovan's arrest was confirmation of her suspicions and justification for her tireless efforts. However, she understood that this was only the beginning of a long legal process. Jamie was ready to continue the fight to ensure maximum punishment for Donovan. Meanwhile, April's children, Serenity and Denzel, remained under Jamie's care. She made every effort to provide them with a stable and loving environment, despite the trauma they had experienced. Jamie was also working on creating the Grief With Me Center, a support center for those who have lost loved ones to violent crimes. April Holt's case drew attention to issues of domestic violence and the importance of thorough investigation of suspicious deaths. It also highlighted the role of social media in covering and solving crimes, as well as the potential dangers of creating an idealized online image. Donovan Holt's arrest was just the beginning of a long legal process. On October 23, 2024, a preliminary hearing took place, where Donovan was officially charged. He appeared in court facing charges of reckless homicide, tampering with evidence, and giving false testimony. The trial attracted significant public and media attention. April Holt's story, her popularity on social media, and the shocking circumstances of her death made this case a subject of wide discussion. The court became a platform where details of their married life, previously hidden behind an idealized image on social media, were revealed. Prosecutors presented evidence supporting the version of events described in Donovan's confession. They emphasized the fingerprints on the plastic bag and tape, as well as inconsistencies in Donovan's initial testimony. An important witness was Denzel, April and Donovan's son, whose testimony about his parents' argument on that fatal day became crucial to the case. Donovan's defense tried to present April's death as a tragic accident that occurred as a result of an argument that got out of control. They emphasized the absence of previous incidents of physical violence in their relationship and Donovan's emotional state after the incident. Jamie Dickerson was an active participant in the trial, testifying as a witness in supporting the prosecution. Her testimony about the last conversation with her daughter, suspicions about Donovan's behavior after the incident, and her tireless efforts to find the truth became an important part of the prosecution's case. The trial lasted several weeks, during which numerous witnesses were heard and detailed evidence was presented. Society closely followed each day of the court sessions, and social media was filled with discussions and speculation. Eventually, the jury reached a verdict. Donovan Holt was found guilty on all charges against him. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison for reckless homicide with additional terms for tampering with evidence and giving false testimony. The verdict was received with relief by April's family and supporters. Jamie Dickerson, speaking to the press after the sentencing, expressed mixed feelings, relief that justice had finally prevailed, but also deep grief for her lost daughter. April Holt's case had a significant impact on society. It drew attention to the issue of domestic violence, especially in the context of couples who seem perfect on social media. Many organizations fighting domestic violence used this story to raise awareness and encourage victims to seek help. Additionally, the case sparked discussions about the need for more thorough investigations of suspicious deaths, especially when it comes to young women. Many experts criticized the initial investigation, pointing out omissions that could have been detected earlier. For April's children, Serenity and Denzel, the verdict meant a certain measure of closure, but also the beginning of a new stage in their lives. Jamie Dickerson continued to care for them, trying to provide the stability and support they needed. The Grief With Me Center, founded by Jamie, became an important resource for families who have experienced similar tragedies. The center offered counseling, support groups, and various programs aimed at helping people cope with grief and trauma. April Holt's death and the trial of Donovan deeply affected the lives of many people, especially her family. April's children, Serenity and Denzel, faced the difficult task of adapting to life without both parents. Jamie Dickerson, their grandmother, took on the role of primary caregiver, striving to provide them with a stable and loving environment. Jamie continued her mission of supporting others, developing the Grief With Me Center. This center became an important resource for families who have experienced similar tragedies, offering counseling, support groups, and therapeutic activities. April's story had a significant impact on public consciousness, becoming a catalyst for discussing important topics such as domestic violence and the dangers of idealizing life on social media. Organizations fighting domestic violence used her story to raise awareness and encourage victims to seek help. The case also influenced legislation. In the state of Tennessee, debates were initiated to strengthen domestic violence laws and improve procedures for investigating suspicious deaths. And April's Law was proposed, which would require more thorough investigation of cases involving the deaths of young women. On social media, April's memory continued to live on. Her former followers regularly shared memories of her and discussed lessons that could be learned from her story. The hashtag Justice for April became a symbol of the fight against domestic violence. Jamie Dickerson wrote a book titled Grieving Through Grace about her experience, which became a bestseller and helped many people going through similar tragedies. The professional community of lash technicians created the April Holt Memorial Scholarship Fund to support young women in this field. The April Holt case generated numerous discussions about the nature of truth, justice, and the role of various institutions in achieving them. It highlighted both the strengths and weaknesses of the justice system, media, and social networks. A key lesson was the importance of persistence in seeking truth. Jamie Dickerson's tireless efforts underscored the role that individuals can play in achieving justice, even when facing resistance from official institutions. The case prompted a critical look at the work of law enforcement agencies, emphasizing the need for more thorough and unbiased investigations. The role of social media proved ambiguous, sparking discussions about the authenticity of online representations and the potential dangers of excessive reliance on social networks. April's story became a catalyst for discussing broader social issues such as domestic violence, mental health, and the importance of supporting loved ones. It highlighted the need for greater awareness and early intervention. For the legal system, this case became an important lesson, leading to a reassessment of investigation procedures. It also raised ethical questions about influencers' responsibility to their audience and the need for critical thinking regarding information on social media. Ultimately, April's story served as a reminder of the fragility of life, the complexity of human relationships, and the importance of protecting vulnerable members of society. Her legacy continues to live on through the changes she inspired and the lives she may have saved even after her death. The story of Samia Shahid begins in the small village of Pandori, Pakistan. This is the place where the Shahid family originated, who later decided to seek a better life in Great Britain. Pandori, a typical Pakistani village, was a center of traditional values and established way of life. Here, everyone knew their neighbor, and family ties were valued above all else. Chaudhry Muhammad and Imtiaz, Samia's parents, grew up in this environment where Islamic traditions and cultural customs shaped the worldview of every resident. They belonged to the Sunni branch of Islam, the largest sect of this religion. Sunni Islam, with its emphasis on adhering to traditions and respecting family values, deeply influenced their lives and future decisions. In Pandori, marriages were often arranged by parents, and marriages between cousins were a common practice. This tradition aimed to preserve family property and strengthen family ties. Chaudhry Muhammad and Imtiaz themselves were cousins, and their marriage was the result of such an arrangement. Seeking a better life for their family, Chaudhry Muhammad and Imtiaz decided to emigrate to Great Britain. They settled in Bradford, a city in West Yorkshire, which already had a significant South Asian community. On November 15, 1987, Samia Shahid was born in this city. Bradford, the sixth largest city in England, became home to many immigrants from South Asia. Here, the Shahid family found their place among a community that tried to preserve its traditions and culture in a new environment. Samia grew up with her sister Mida surrounded by a large family that quickly gained influence in the local community. Samia's parents, like many other immigrants, worked hard to ensure a better future for their children. They opened their own limousine and car rental business, which became successful. Other family members also developed their businesses. Samia's uncle owned a fish and chips shop, another owned a flower shop. This entrepreneurial spirit of the Shahid family helped them establish themselves in the new society and ensure financial stability. Samia's childhood and youth were influenced by two different cultures, British and Pakistani. As a second-generation immigrant, she constantly balanced between the values and traditions of her Pakistani heritage and the realities of life in a Western country. On one hand, Samia attended a British school, interacted with local peers, and was immersed in Western pop culture. She loved fast cars, was fascinated by makeup and fashion. Her friends described her as a cheerful, sociable, and active girl who was always the center of attention. On the other hand, at home, Samia lived in a world of Pakistani traditions. The Shahid family, while providing girls with the opportunity to receive a Western education, remained devoted to their Muslim faith and cultural customs. They were Sunni Muslims, and religion played an important role in their daily lives. This duality often created an internal conflict for Samia. She loved her family and respected their traditions, but she also longed for the freedom and independence she saw in her British peers. For example, although Samia loved driving, she wasn't allowed to do so due to cultural restrictions. However, according to her friends, she sometimes secretly rented a car and drove, enjoying the speed and freedom. Samia worked part-time at the Bradford post office but received significant financial support from her father. Chaudhry Muhammad, like a typical Pakistani father, spared no expense for his beloved daughter's wishes. This generosity, however, was often accompanied by high expectations regarding Samia's behavior and her dedication to family values. At the same time, Samia's sister, Mida, had a somewhat different view on life. Although the details of their relationship are not fully disclosed in the sources, it seems that Mida was more inclined towards a traditional lifestyle. These differences between the sisters could create additional tension in the family. In 2012, when Samia turned 25, her parents decided it was time for her to get married. This decision reflected traditional Pakistani values, where marriage is seen not only as a union of two people but also as a unification of two families. Although Sunni Islam, which the family adhered to, did not require arranged marriages, such practice was still encouraged in their culture. Samia's parents approached the choice of a husband for their daughter with all seriousness. They were looking for a candidate who would meet their idea of an ideal son-in-law, from a good family, with an appropriate social status, and, most importantly, someone who would share their cultural and religious values. After careful consideration, they settled on Chaudhry Muhammad Shakil. Shakil was Samia's cousin and came from their native village of Pandori in Pakistan. The choice of a relative as a future husband was not accidental. Among British Pakistanis, marriages between cousins were a common practice, often with the aim of preserving land ownership within the family and strengthening family ties. However, Shakil had an ambiguous reputation. He had recently been released from prison, where he had served a sentence for shooting another man over a land dispute. This fact caused concern for Samia, but her parents seemed to not give it much importance, perhaps believing that marriage would help Shakil get on the right path. When Samia was informed about the plans for her marriage, she found herself faced with a difficult choice. On one hand, she had grown up in Britain and dreamed of romantic love and marriage by her own choice. On the other hand, she deeply respected her parents and didn't want to disappoint them. Moreover, the concept of family honor, deeply rooted in their culture, put significant pressure on her. Samia shared her doubts with close friends. She told them that she saw Shakil more as a brother than a potential husband. She also expressed concern about his past and character. However, publicly, Samia tried to show enthusiasm about the upcoming wedding, not wanting to upset her family. Preparation for the wedding turned into a grand event. Samia's parents spared no expense to make the ceremony as lavish as possible. They took Samia to the best Pakistani shops in Bradford, buying luxurious outfits, precious jewelry, and exquisite accessories. Chaudhry Muhammad paid for all these purchases, demonstrating his love for his daughter and desire to provide her with the best wedding. Samia participated in these preparations, trying to find joy in choosing wedding attire and jewelry. She understood that these material things were her parents' way of expressing their love and care. However, deep inside, she felt that money couldn't buy true happiness. During this period, Samia faced an internal conflict. She was torn between the desire to meet her family's expectations and her own doubts about the future marriage. Her friends recalled that she often seemed upset and confused, although she tried to hide it from her family. In February 2012, Samia traveled to Pakistan to prepare for the wedding. Before leaving, she wrote a message to a friend, confessing that she was making the biggest mistake of her life. This message vividly illustrated her internal struggles and doubts about the upcoming marriage. Samia and Shakil's wedding was a lavish celebration that lasted 4 days and gathered over 1,000 guests. It was a typical Pakistani wedding ceremony, full of colorful rituals and traditions. Guests from Bradford came to Pakistan to share the joy of this event with the Shahid family. The wedding ceremony included the traditional nikah, an Islamic marriage contract that was conducted in the presence of witnesses and a religious figure. This rite, according to Islamic traditions, was considered the official conclusion of marriage. However, it's important to note that this religious marriage was not necessarily recognized as legal in Great Britain without additional civil registration. As a wedding gift, Samia's father, Chaudhry Muhammad, gave the newlyweds the house next to the family home in Pandori. This gesture demonstrated not only the father's generosity but also the traditional expectation that the young couple would stay living near the parental home, maintaining close family ties. After the wedding, Samia stayed to live with Shakil in Pakistan. For her, this was a significant change, from living in a modern British city to residing in a traditional Pakistani village. Samia faced the need to adapt to a completely different way of life, with more limited opportunities for personal freedom and self-realization. For 4 months, Samia tried to adjust to her new life as a wife in Pakistan. This period was full of challenges for her. She had to get used to a new daily routine, fulfill the duties of a wife according to local traditions, and all this in an environment that was significantly different from what she was used to in Bradford. In June 2012, after 4 months of living in Pakistan, Samia returned to Bradford. Her husband, Shakil, remained in Pakistan, waiting for immigration documents to be processed. This moment became critical in their relationship, as distance and cultural differences began to create additional tension. Upon returning to Bradford, Samia had to apply for a visa for Shakil so that he could become a British citizen. This process was an important step for uniting the couple in Great Britain. However, according to Samia's friends, she was not in a hurry with this process, which could indicate her doubts about the future of their marriage. Samia's friends noticed significant changes in her behavior after her return. She became more withdrawn, nervous, and agitated, especially when the conversation turned to Shaquille or their marriage. These changes indicated an internal conflict and discomfort that Samia was feeling. Despite living in different countries, Shaquille insisted on daily video calls via Skype and constant communication throughout the day. This demand created additional pressure on Samia, limiting her personal freedom and ability to lead her usual life in Britain. In August 2012, the situation escalated. Samia left a voice message to a friend expressing a desire to die, talking about hating her life and not wanting to be Shaquille's wife anymore. This message vividly demonstrated the depth of her emotional stress and dissatisfaction with the marriage. It's important to note that there are different views on Samia's situation during this period. Her sister Madiha later claimed that Samia boasted about her lavish wedding and talked about happiness in marriage. This discrepancy in testimonies underscores the complexity of the situation and the possible difference between how Samia presented her life publicly and what she actually felt. A documentary about this case shows a photograph of Samia with a black eye, dated August 2012. Although the exact origin of this bruise is not established, its presence raises questions about possible violence in the relationship. However, it's important to note that this photograph could have been taken at a different time, and the date of its sending to a friend does not necessarily correspond to the date of the incident itself. In December 2012, after approximately 6 months of living in Bradford, Samia returned to Pakistan again to live with Shaquille. This decision could have been the result of family pressure or an attempt to save the marriage. However, according to her friends, the situation did not improve and Samia was still not happy. In June 2013, Samia returned to Bradford again after 6 months of living with Shaquille in Pakistan. This time, friends noticed significant changes in her behavior. She seemed happier, more communicative, and lively. The reason for these changes soon became clear: Samia had met someone new. This person was Syed Mukhtar Kazim, whom friends called Ali. He, like Samia, had Pakistani origins but possessed British citizenship and worked in Dubai. Their acquaintance began on the internet, where they initially established a friendly relationship. In October 2013, Samia and Ali met in person for the first time in London. This meeting became a turning point in Samia's life. According to her, there was an immediate strong mutual attraction between them. Ali embodied everything Samia desired in a man. He was loving, caring, kind, and understanding. Samia opened up to Ali, telling him about her difficult situation with Shaquille. She shared her feelings about the marriage, which she considered imposed, and how she felt controlled and unhappy. Ali, for his part, couldn't understand how a father could turn his daughter into an object for exchange or sale. Their relationship developed quickly, but both were aware of the risks associated with their connection. In a culture where divorce and extramarital relationships were strongly condemned, their love could have serious consequences. However, they felt that their feelings were stronger than the fear of possible threats and worth fighting for. For Samia, her relationship with Ali became a breath of fresh air. She felt that she had finally met someone who understood her desire for freedom and personal happiness. Ali supported her desire to live her own life and didn't try to control her as Shaquille did. However, their relationship was not cloudless. They knew that their connection could cause serious conflict with Samia's family and threaten their safety. The story of Banaz Mahmud, a young British woman of Kurdish origin who was killed by her own family for a relationship with a man her parents didn't approve of, was fresh in the memory of many in their community. Samia and Ali were aware that their situation could have similar risks. Despite these fears, Samia and Ali continued to develop their relationship. They dreamed of a shared future where they could freely love each other, have children, and grow old together. These dreams gave Samia the strength to resist family pressure and traditions. In May 2014, Samia made the brave decision to divorce Shaquille. This was not an easy decision, considering the cultural context and possible consequences for her family. However, Samia felt that she couldn't continue living in a marriage that made her unhappy. The divorce process proved to be complicated due to the peculiarities of their marriage. Since Samia and Shakil's marriage was not registered under British law, she couldn't divorce through a British court. Instead, she turned to the Islamic Sharia Council of Great Britain. Before approaching the council, Samia took another important step. She converted from Sunni to Shia Islam, the branch to which Ali belonged. This step had not only religious significance but also symbolized her desire for a new life and readiness to abandon the past. Samia visited a mosque where she met with a religious leader named Mr. Kazmi. Under oath, she stated that her first marriage was forced and concluded without her free will, under family pressure. This testimony was critical for the divorce process, as under Islamic law, a marriage concluded under coercion can be declared invalid. After receiving Samia's testimony, Mr. Kazmi contacted Shakil, asking for his version of events. However, Shakil refused to discuss their marriage, which led to Mr. Kazmi declaring Samia and Shakil's marriage invalid. This divorce process took place in secret from Samia's family. Several close friends supported her, being present when she signed the divorce papers. The fact that Samia was able to conduct this procedure while living in her parents' house in Bradford testifies to her determination and resourcefulness in achieving her goal. Soon after the divorce, Samia and Ali began planning their own wedding. Their decision to marry was a bold step, considering the potential consequences and reaction from Samia's family. They understood that their marriage had to remain a secret to protect both of them from possible negative reactions. In September 2014, Samia and Ali secretly married in Leeds. The ceremony was modest, attended only by a few close friends who helped the bride prepare for the ceremony. The Nikah, Islamic marriage ceremony, was conducted by the same Mr. Kazmi who had previously granted Samia a divorce. The wedding day was filled with joy and emotions. According to friends, Samia was radiant with happiness and said she felt like a real princess. This sharply contrasted with her first wedding, where she felt anxiety and doubts. Ali recalled that on this day he was not only the groom but also played the roles of driver and photographer, which emphasized the intimate and personal nature of their ceremony. It's important to note that Samia and Ali didn't limit themselves to just a religious ceremony. They also registered their marriage in an English registry office, thus ensuring legal recognition of their union in Great Britain. This step demonstrated their desire to build a shared future on a solid legal foundation. However, the joy of the secret wedding was short-lived. In October 2014, shortly after the marriage, Samia became a victim of an attack. As she was walking down the street with her cousin, she was attacked by several men in an alley. Strangely, only Samia was hurt. She was beaten with metal rods on her legs. This incident was clearly not accidental. The nature of the attack and the fact that only Samia was injured indicated that the attack was planned and specifically directed against her. This raised suspicions that someone, possibly connected to her family, had learned about her new marriage and decided to punish her. Samia and her cousin immediately reported the attack to the police. A medical examination confirmed the seriousness of the injuries. Samia's legs were covered with red and purple bruises. This incident became an alarming signal for Samia and Ali, demonstrating the reality of the threat they faced. At this time, Ali had to return to Dubai for work, leaving Samia in Bradford waiting for a visa that would allow her to join him later. This separation was painful for both, especially considering the recent attack and growing tension in Samia's family. It seems that the Shahid family learned about their daughter's attack from a phone call when she called her parents from the police station. However, instead of support, Samia faced a stream of insults. The police heard the entire conversation, while Samia's mother, Imtiaz, didn't know that others were listening. Samia deliberately did this to show the police the toxic environment in which she had been living recently. This conversation became vivid evidence of the difficult situation in which Samia found herself. She felt like a prisoner in the house where she once was happy, enduring unpleasant words from people she loved more than life. Living in a family with such strong beliefs and established values was difficult. Sometimes Samia felt like she was suffocating from constant control and couldn't escape from the web of imposed principles. For Samia, who grew up in Western culture and was used to relying on her parents for everything, a different life seemed unreal, a life where she could make her own decisions and make her own choices. The secret marriage to Ali gave her the strength to hold on and not give up. Samia's parents learned about her divorce from Shakil only in May 2015 and reacted extremely negatively to her actions. Until this time, they probably only suspected something but didn't voice their doubts aloud. They claimed that the divorce was invalid since the Islamic Sharia Council had no legal authority in either Great Britain or Pakistan. Therefore, in their opinion, Samia was still legally married to Shakil. Samia's mother expressed the most displeasure. Imtiaz repeatedly insulted her daughter, telling her to come to her senses and not disgrace the family. This reaction deeply hurt Samia, who had hoped for understanding and support from her parents. When Ali returned to Dubai, he hoped that the situation would calm down. However, the newlyweds understood that they would never be safe if they stayed in Bradford. Family disapproval could lead to tragedy. There are many stories about honor-related crimes, and Samia and Ali didn't want to become the next victims. Fortunately, that same month, Samia received a visa to move to Dubai. Several friends helped her secretly buy a ticket and prepare for departure. As soon as the documents were ready, Samia boarded a plane and flew to Ali the next day. This was not an easy decision, considering how much she loved her family. But for the first time, she went against the will of her loved ones for her own happiness, hoping that this sacrifice would justify itself. As soon as Samia flew to Dubai, her parents reported her missing to the police. The family simply didn't want to accept the fact that she had made her own choice and ignored their opinion. When they learned about their daughter's secret marriage, they declared the second marriage fictitious. They even went to the Shia mosque cleric, Mr. Kazmi, demanding explanations. They refused to listen to any reasonable arguments and equated their daughter's relationship with Ali to adultery, believing that under Muslim law she was still married to Shakil. The Shahid family even threatened the cleric for facilitating Samia's sin. Mr. Kazmi reported the threats to the police, and the authorities provided him with some safety advice. Meanwhile, Samia was extremely happy in Dubai. She enjoyed a carefree, free life full of love. She drove a car, cooked, and was deeply in love with her husband, Ali. Samia openly shared her happiness on social media. She and Ali couldn't wait to become parents. Samia very much wanted a child and dreamed of becoming a mother as soon as possible. At the same time, Samia couldn't completely let go of ties with her family and wanted to exist in both worlds, in Bradford and Dubai. She always dreamed of raising her future children in Great Britain so that they would become British. Samia had spent almost all of her conscious life in England, surrounded by a large family, and couldn't imagine that this tension between her and her loved ones would last forever. Samia talked to her parents almost every day, trying to convince them that she wasn't guilty and just wanted to be happy. Every minute of her marriage to Shakil had been a burden for her. She wanted her parents to love Ali as much as she did and accept her choice. More than anything, Samia dreamed of seeing her father together with Ali, but unfortunately, her dream was not destined to come true. Instead, Chaudhry Muhammad called the fake son-in-law and asked him to leave his daughter alone. Naturally, Ali refused, stating that Samia was now his lawful wife and he wouldn't give her up. In Muhammad's eyes, the new husband didn't become part of the family, partly because he wasn't a Sunni Muslim. Moreover, their marriage was conducted secretly, without parental approval. Reputation and family honor are of great importance in some cultures. Ali and Samia, in the opinion of her parents and other relatives, showed disrespect to the Shahid family, and now everyone would point fingers at them. In their eyes, a woman's desire to live her own life was an unthinkable luxury and a betrayal of the family. In June 2016, Samia learned that Shakil's mother, her aunt, had died. Samia was very upset. She loved her aunt and wanted to go to Pakistan for the funeral. But she knew that the trip would be risky and dangerous, especially considering that many, including Shakil's relatives, thought that she had disgraced them and brought shame to the family. Ali advised against going, and she agreed that it was better to stay in Dubai. Samia's father, Muhammad, was also struggling with health problems. He suffered from diabetes. One day, Samia received a call from her mother and sister Mida. They said that during their stay in Pakistan, their father's health had significantly deteriorated, and he might not have much time left. Samia would never forgive herself if her father died and she didn't say goodbye to him. So after long deliberation, she made the final decision to go to Pakistan. Ali didn't agree with her choice. He was very upset but felt helpless. After all, it was her father. How could he stop her? If something happened to Chaudhry Muhammad and she wasn't there, Samia would never forgive herself. Besides, Mida had already booked her a plane ticket. Thus, feeling enormous fear for his wife, Ali still drove her to the airport. He said that she could still change her mind. Excited about the upcoming meeting with loved ones she hadn't seen for a long time, Samia assured her husband that she would be all right. They said goodbye. Samia boarded the plane and on July 14, 2016, flew to Pakistan. Before the flight, she sent a message to a friend saying, "Pray that I come back alive." On the first night in Pakistan, Samia stayed at a friend's house. She left her documents and return ticket there for safety. Throughout her stay, she maintained constant contact with Ali, assuring him of her safety. She spent all her time in Pakistan with her family. On July 18, she visited her aunt's grave with her father. On July 19, Ali told her about a bad dream he had, to which she responded by asking him to pray for her safe return to Dubai. She was supposed to fly home in 2 days, but on July 20, Samia stopped responding to messages. Ali's messages remained unread, and this silence greatly worried him. That evening, a distressed man called the Pandori police station, reporting the death of his daughter. When the police arrived at the specified address, they found a woman's body at the foot of the stairs. She was dead, and it was Samia. Her shoes were nearby, her handbag was at her feet, and her face was covered with a black scarf. Her eyes were closed, and foam was coming from her mouth. The man who called introduced himself as Samia's father, Muhammad. He told the officers that his daughter lived in this house with her husband Shakil, and pointed to the stairs from which she allegedly fell and died. When the police asked where Shakil was, the father shrugged and said he didn't know. No one had seen him since Samia's death. A few hours later, Samia's mother and sister arrived in Pakistan, having learned of her death. An autopsy was immediately conducted, after which the young woman's body was handed over to relatives. The Shahid family buried Samia on the same day she died. Since the police report stated that no injuries or visible signs of violence were found on the body, her death was not considered suspicious. Hasty burials are not unusual, as Muslim traditions and Sharia law require immediate burial if there are no disputes about the cause of death. News of Samia's death spread quickly, but the reports were contradictory. Some said the young woman died from a heart attack or an asthma attack, others claimed she fell down the stairs and broke her neck. Local news agencies reported that Samia had committed suicide due to deep depression caused by the absence of children, but her family denied this claim. Ali received a call from Samia's cousin, who informed him that she had died of a heart attack. Ali initially didn't believe it, thinking it was some sick joke, that they were just trying to keep her in Pakistan. He immediately flew out to be with his wife. When he realized that Samia had indeed died, he went to the Pandori police station and declared that his wife had been murdered. Ali explained how Samia had left her first husband Shakil, and how her family was enraged by this. His story clearly changed the police's view of Samia's death. They suggested it could have been an honor killing, but they couldn't do anything since the body had already been buried. When news of the mysterious death of a young British woman spread in England, news channel representatives contacted Samia's father, Muhammad. In the interview, he insisted that his daughter was happy in her marriage and that her husband's name was Shakil. He completely denied Ali's existence, calling him a blackmailer. Eventually, Ali obtained a copy of Samia's autopsy report. It stated that a reddish-brown bruise 19 centimeters in size was found around her neck, and the cause of death was strangulation. Male sperm was also found inside her body. It is suspected that the police were initially bribed to conceal the true cause of Samia Shahid's death. Ali immediately held a press conference in Pakistan, showing the media photos of the bruise on his wife's neck. He wanted what happened to Samia to be widely known so that he could find out how she died and who was responsible. After this, Ali required round-the-clock police protection as he began receiving numerous death threats. Samia's friends in Great Britain were also actively involved. They contacted the Member of Parliament for Bradford, Nas Shah, through their acquaintances. The MP wrote directly to the Prime Minister of Pakistan, informing him about Samia's death and daring to call it an honor killing. Only after this did the Pakistani police begin a thorough investigation into Samia Shahid's death. Nas Shah's intervention had consequences. 2 people from Bradford were arrested for threatening the MP 8 days after Shakil's escape. He was found and brought in for questioning along with Samia's father, Chaudhry Muhammad. Shakil confessed that he wanted to force his wife to annul her marriage to Ali and stay with him in Pakistan. He was enraged that she had left him and prevented him from moving to Great Britain. On the morning of July 20th, he searched Samia's belongings for her passport and return ticket but found nothing. Shakil tried to stop her from returning, but Samia refused. Enraged, he pushed her onto the bed and raped her. His sperm was found inside her body. Then Samia tried to escape from the house where she had felt trapped throughout their marriage, but her ex-husband caught up with her, wrapped her scarf around her neck, and squeezed tightly. Samia's father, Muhammad, denied any involvement. This time the police didn't believe the story about a happy marriage. Investigators believed that both the Shahid family and Shakil's family felt disrespected by Samia's attempt to divorce, marry another man who wasn't a Sunni Muslim, and flee with him to Dubai, thereby ruining Shakil's chances of moving to Great Britain and disgracing the family. The problem lay in the lack of sufficient evidence. Although Samia's death was recognized as murder, it was impossible to prove who exactly killed her. In September 2018, after 2 years in custody, Shakil was released on bail. Despite his confession to the police, this was not enough for a conviction in Pakistan. In 2019, Shakil married for the second time to a British Pakistani woman and applied for a visa to enter Great Britain, as this was his ultimate goal. However, MP Nas Shah ensured that the visa was denied. After 4 months of imprisonment, Chaudhry Muhammad Shahid, Samia's father, appealed to the Supreme Court and was released due to insufficient evidence. The court found the evidence insufficient to keep him in custody. In January 2018, he was hospitalized due to kidney failure and died in a Lahore hospital at the age of 52. In October 2018, arrest warrants were issued for Samia's mother and sister, but they managed to return to Great Britain. From there, Meeta gave a completely different version of events. She claimed that their family was free and their parents never forced them into anything. Instead, according to her, Samia often complained to her about life with Ali, saying that he had taken all her money and she was living in poverty in Dubai. She even sent photos showing that her life was far from luxurious. Meeta believed that these accusations had ruined their family, tarnished their reputation, and left them in poverty due to false claims. Regardless of this, it doesn't change the tragic fact that a young woman was sent to her death at the peak of her life by those she trusted and loved. Samia Shahid's death caused widespread resonance both in Great Britain and Pakistan. This tragedy drew attention to the problem of honor killings and women's rights in some cultures. Her story became a symbol of the struggle between traditional values and the desire for personal freedom. Samia's case highlighted the complexity of cultural conflicts in the modern globalized world, where traditional practices clash with modern concepts of human rights and individual autonomy. It also highlighted the problems faced by women in some communities where family honor is considered more important than personal happiness and safety. This story leaves us with many questions about the balance between cultural traditions and personal freedom. It demonstrates how deeply rooted cultural norms can affect people's lives, especially women, even in modern Western societies. Samia's case also sparked discussions about the effectiveness of legal systems in protecting women from honor-related violence. The fact that Shakil still hasn't been convicted, despite his confession, raises questions about the fairness and effectiveness of the judicial system. The story of Samia Shahid continues to influence public opinion and policy. It has become a catalyst for discussing the need for better protection of women from honor-related violence and the importance of integrating immigrant communities in Western countries. Samia deserved a chance to make her own choices, regardless of whether she made mistakes or not. No one has the right to take someone else's life. Unfortunately, the men from the Shahid family never understood this. This tragedy underscores the need to continue the fight for women's rights and freedom of choice, especially in cultures where traditional values can limit personal freedom. Samia's story reminds us of the importance of education, dialogue between cultures, and continuous efforts to overcome harmful traditions. The memory of Samia Shahid continues to live on, reminding us of the price some women pay for their pursuit of freedom and happiness. Her story calls for greater vigilance, compassion, and action to protect vulnerable members of society.